Stockdale, and welcome to the Access to Inspiration podcast, the show where you can gain inspiration from people who may be unlike you. We hope their stories and insights enable you to transcend day-to-day challenges and reflect on what you are capable of achieving. Today I'm speaking to Alysia Silberg on what it's like to be a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Welcome to the podcast, Alysia.
Thank you for having me. Very honored.
When I was looking at your profile, Alysia, you seem to defy all stereotypes because you're really multi-talented. What I've got listed here: serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, statistician, data scientist, fully qualified actuary, technology investor, and I'm sure many more things besides. But how would you describe yourself to us?
I'm someone that started with very little, and I've done my very best to make the most of every opportunity. So whilst my resume looks like it has a lot of things, I think it all made sense as I was going through this journey, that I just embraced what was given to me and made the most of it and was very grateful. And that's taken me on a very interesting roller coaster journey that I'm proud of, but most importantly, very grateful for. A lot of people supported me along this journey.
So it almost sounds like you're a little bit of an explorer, that whatever opportunity comes along, you want to explore it to its maximum.
Absolutely. I do see myself as a modern day adventurer. I think it started with my late father, who also had a very interesting life. And I grew up, I think a lot of the time being told I'm a dreamer. A lot of people didn't approve of that, but I have an insatiable quest for knowledge and learning. And I think that means that I'm constantly asking questions, constantly curious, and constantly learning to grow and apply and see where that takes me. So it's been an adventure, very much so.
Now, I know you were brought up in South Africa, Alysia. Tell us about what that was like for you. You've talked about a little bit about your father already. So give us a sense of what childhood was like for you.
Up until my father died, childhood was okay. My father had a very interesting life and he lived all over the world. He was a pharmacist by training, did extremely well, spoke many languages, but he owned the oldest costume store in South Africa. And I grew up in their costume store, which makes for a very interesting life. When he passed away, it was very sudden. We lost everything. And it was extremely difficult, basically brutal, because for the first time in my life, I realized that we may not have a roof over our heads. That's how bad it was. And it brought out the entrepreneur in me. And I started building companies from a very young age and just making of the opportunities that were available to me, in the sense that I started a tutoring school when I was 10 years old. My brother was trying to help me save our family business. I used what money I had from a tutoring school to go to Asia and to buy stock. And I was basically negotiating containers to bring them back to South Africa so that we could sell the stock when I was like 11, 12 years old. So it was quite the journey. I always had a passion for education. My family was very, very, very obsessed with that. My grandfather was British, and he was one of those mathematicians that could add pages of numbers just in his head. That was a love we shared, a love for mathematics, a love for learning. And he was the person I was closest to growing up. So this learning combined with this entrepreneurship was something I knew from selling in my dad's shop. So throughout my childhood in South Africa, it was always these combinations of these things. And I just kept building stuff. A lot of the time, as I say, I never even knew what I was doing, in the sense that I never called myself an entrepreneur. Like a lot of people here in Silicon Valley define themselves, but I was an entrepreneur, 13 or 14. I wasn't. I was a survivor. And I knew there was a better world out there because of all the books I read. And I wanted to be part of that world. Often it was very lonely because I was weird, extremely weird. No one quite knew what to do with me at school. I was a nerd and no one knew how to deal with that, in the sense that I wanted to study these hardcore subjects. I was very isolated. I was very lucky that I played the cello and piano. I was taught by the same teacher that taught Yo-Yo Ma and Jacqueline Debray. And I was extremely lucky to be talented at these instruments and to be given the opportunities to learn these instruments, because I spent a lot of time in music rooms by myself where I would practice, which created more discipline. So it all created foundations where I was brave to go on this journey around the world, and that, but started very young. Discipline was a big part of it.
Yeah, I certainly can get the sense of that in what you're saying, and also the resourcefulness to make the best of what you've got at the time. As your world began to then expand, Alysia, and you were looking for something more than what you were experiencing in South Africa, what took you to the USA?
Originally, it was to Canada. We lived in a very dangerous part of Johannesburg. I'm sure if anyone in your community knows anything about South Africa, we kept our family home, as a result of lots of hard work. But we used to have robbers coming almost on a nightly basis, to break into the house. It was like we got attacked where we were held. I was shot at. I've got a scar to this day. I almost watched my mother die. My grandmother was attacked when I was very young. There was a court case. It was awful. And I had it in my head. I wanted to leave. And the one attack, the one that I spoke about, where my mother, it was absolutely the stuff you don't come back from. And I remember standing screaming, saying, please, can I go to Canada? Please, can I go to Canada? My family was there and I wanted to go and study there. And it was hard because it was the first time I'd been separated from a mom and brother. We were a unit because that's how we'd survived for so long after losing my dad. And I went to Canada, and that opened my eyes to what it was like to live in a country that so much was at your disposal. I remember going to the bank. I was 15 years old at the time. And I was like, I want to open an account and I'm an entrepreneur. How do I go about this? I want to start a business. And they took me to meet with the bank manager and they sat me down. They treated me so well. I was like, this is strange. I've never experienced anything like this in South Africa, where there was always a discomfort with people being entrepreneurs, especially like A students and that. That journey in Canada really, really opened my eyes and really made me think, wow, this is incredible. If you want to start a company, you go to the Small Business Administration and there's just information available for everything. There's funding available for everything. There's support. You can talk to experts. You can talk to very successful business owners. And that really made me think very carefully about how to build companies and how I could apply that to both to what I did, as well as always helping other entrepreneurs. That was always an obsession because I was so fortunate to have had the help I had. So it was always like, how do I share this information with other people like me? And so that was the Canadian part of the journey. I went back to South Africa because I felt incredibly grateful for all the opportunities that had been given to me in Canada. And that was when I started lecturing at universities. And I was lecturing at the same time maths and science to students in their last year at school, where there was a shortage of maths and science teachers. So I was teaching people the same age as me. And at university, I was teaching people statistics, finance, financial maths. It was crazy. They were the same age as me. And to connect with these people, because I couldn't exactly scream at them and say, like, sit there, listen to me, demand respect. It came through a love of the subject matter, where I'd be like, okay, you have no interest in this subject. I'm going to share with you like this thing that I'm so lucky to be able to do. And so as a result of that, I connected with these people and helped educate them and built lifelong friendships. But what also happened was I saw that many of these students in South Africa were first generation university graduates who had never been given the opportunity to basically have any education outside what their parents had sacrificed because they'd been the victims of apartheid. And these people would go into the workforce and they couldn't get jobs. So I'd go to a retail shop and I'd see students working there after graduating, and it made me sick. I was like, is this the system? Is this what we're helping perpetuate? I went back to the universities I was lecturing and I was like, I won't teach if I can't actually help these people become entrepreneurs because it's pointless. We educate them, they're just going to sit at home and they just can't even earn minimum wage. And so I forced the universities to start teaching education. And at that time, I was always an entrepreneur. So I was helping these people build companies the same way I was building companies. And that was deeply, deeply inspiring to me. And then as I was building my own companies, I built a very successful real estate portfolio from the ground up with my husband. And we built Digital by Design, which was one of the first digital media agencies in the world to use data for our multinational clients. And that was something that was very unique at the time. And we started working in the UK because I had this obsession with growing, finding clients overseas, expanding. And I started reading more and I was like, I want to go to the US. I want to build a company in the US. People said, do not do it. You're going to fail. You have no place doing this. And it was that sense of self-belief, which at times, you doubt yourself, but you have to keep finding what's inside yourself to keep on going. You got to be resilient, like super resilient.
So I imagine it's a little bit like a red rag to a bull, that because people said, I bet you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. Perhaps it became even more appealing to you.
Absolutely. People ask me, why do you do this? And so many times I've seen injustice. I remember being young and them saying to me I should run for the president of South Africa because I fought a school bully on behalf of one of my friends. I never realized how small I was or how big this person was, the ridiculousness of what I was doing. But I saw injustice being done and I fought for more.
I'm getting the sense that if it was easy, you wouldn't be doing it. For many of our listeners, perhaps they have heard a lot of things about Silicon Valley. You being in the midst of that world, Alysia, paint us a picture of what it's like to be in the world of venture capital in Silicon Valley.
I can paint the glamorous picture or I can paint the truthful picture. I think it's
like
more
the real one.
valuable. I think it's more valuable to your audience to tell you the truth. It's extremely, extremely competitive. I work 7 days a week, 15 to 18 hours a day. Everything I've done, I've had to create myself. As a woman, it has been very, very difficult. As someone that wasn't born in Silicon Valley, that too has been very difficult. It's been a very, very challenging journey. And it's just been my belief in what I'm doing to keep on going. When it comes to British entrepreneurs, I do my absolute best to help British entrepreneurs prepare themselves to come here. I think the ecosystem in the UK is extremely valuable. Having lived in the UK, having been very supported by many people doing what I do in the UK, I think it's a nurturing environment. I think there's a lot for us as investors to do, as leaders to do, to help strengthen the ecosystem from a funding perspective, from an opportunity perspective. But the UK is very diversity friendly. It gives people from all walks of life opportunities. I've been in that experience where I've worn myself down to breaking point and haven't practiced my own daily habits of success because you're so busy trying to build these companies, which is something we all have to be careful of. Not working to a point where you actually don't know why you're doing it anymore. You have to be super careful about that stuff. So it's a journey. A lot of people want to do it. A lot of people don't know what it's really like to build these companies, in the sense that you'll put everything on the line. I ask entrepreneurs very, very challenging questions in terms of, do you want to not see your family for 10 years? Do you want to just do this one thing and to some extent give up your ownership of your company? Because the moment you take external investors, then you owe a responsibility to those investors. And when those investors are institutional investors, those people owe responsibilities to their investors. And often those investors are pension funds and people who depend on your ability as an entrepreneur to deliver massive returns. And often people are not aware of what they're signing themselves up to. And for many people, this system works extremely well. But for many people, I think the idea that they could build very successful businesses, say in the UK, where they can take care of their families, where they can take care of their communities, where they are contributing members of society without moving across the world, without all that, I think that's a conversation that should be had, because the media portrays this as the only way to be a company builder. But there are other very healthy options as well.
So I'm getting the sense of the relentlessness of it, the pursuit of success, and obviously the growth potential that the companies have that you invest in, Alysia. How do you measure your own success?
That's a very interesting question. And often I have to ask myself that, because the job is a hard job. And I think I do things that I think fuel me. And I try to set goals that are realistic, but also accomplishable, in the sense that I'm writing a book, and I wanted to write this book for quite some time, but I never wanted it to be about my story, but more about our story as entrepreneurs and the lessons I have learned. The thrust of the book is that I'm speaking to entrepreneurs honestly, in the sense that a lot of people think people like me have these incredible lives, where everything just works like clockwork, and, you write these checks, you make these investments, people see me speaking publicly, or they see this life as, wow, the life of VC is so glamorous. And it's not. It's not at all. It's very hard work, and there's a lot that goes into it. And I think writing a book, being able to be honest, being able to be transparent, being able to have people reach out to me and say, thank you, that was valuable. Thank you for sharing these insights. Thank you for helping me build the kind of company I wanted to build. Or thank you for helping me create the type of social entrepreneurship organization that has affected change. That was very important to me. I hosted a very successful radio show for 3 years across the world. And I put that on hold because I was building a fund to invest in companies. The show's coming back now, and it's coming back because a lot of people wanted it to come back. And it's coming back as a better version of what it was, in the sense that I feel I can be even more transparent with entrepreneurs. I can affect change in a greater way because of that transparency, asking the difficult questions when it comes to the investors, challenging investors to say, like, what do you really think of that company? Tell us the truth. You're not helping this entrepreneur by sparing their feelings. To me, these are ways that I measure myself, because it shows growth on my part, and growth to me and learning. Those are critical successes. And then again, being financially very successful in Silicon Valley is a measure of success. So being a billionaire is very aspirational here, and you're surrounded by very wealthy people. Every young person that exits a company that becomes very successful makes a lot of money. And you have to be sure not to get caught up in only that, in the sense that if you start defining yourself by one thing, which is how much am I worth, it becomes a very lonely journey. And again, always balancing yourself with, am I doing things that move me, or am I doing things that motivate me? That's how I measure myself, that I'm a full human. I'm contributing, I'm helping, I'm succeeding. But this one dimension of how much am I worth, I think it creates a very, very lonely existence.
So you're giving us that more rounded sense of what success means to you. And again, and also a strong sense that your desire to share the realities of these places and environments in which you operate with others is also what drives you.
Absolutely. I think it makes me a better investor, in the sense that entrepreneurs know when they come to me, I'm 100% transparent. I'm 100% truthful. I'm not all knowing. I think that creates very strong foundations as far as partnering with an entrepreneur goes, because you're asking them to trust you. You're asking them to invest in a relationship with you. And that's a foundation upon which you can build. But if you can't be empathetic, and I think that's the benefit of having done this my entire life, I don't feel insecure asking these challenging questions to the entrepreneurs. Why are you doing this? What is your purpose for doing this? Is it to make money? Because if it's to make money, there are other ways of becoming extremely wealthy. You can join a tech startup, and if you join the right startup, you'll be extremely wealthy. But to do this, to really do this, you've got to be super dedicated to it. You've got to be super committed to it. And you've got to have very, very difficult conversations on a regular basis. You know that saying, easy decisions and hard decisions, and they create very different types of lives. You've got to be the one to do the personal work in terms of who do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? And it starts, as investors, it starts with asking ourselves those questions, or we have no right to partner with entrepreneurs.
So you're walking the talk yourself in terms of what you expect from others by demonstrating that in how you conduct yourself.
I would like to believe I am. I'd hate for someone to turn around and say to me, you're a hypocrite. It's almost an obsession. I've got this thing inside of me where if I feel like I'm telling an entrepreneur, well, you need to go to that company and you need to meet with that company and you need to do something that's extremely uncomfortable for you, I need to know that I would do exactly the same thing, because otherwise it just makes me a crappy person, and I just don't want to be that person. And I feel like I've been so lucky to have gotten so many opportunities. One of my mentors turned around to me here. We were coming from an event in Silicon Valley, and he once turned around to me and said, you know, your life is a product of many people's effort. And I see that with companies, whatever it is, often one person gets the credit, but there are many, many people that help create that success. And I think I would like to be an embodiment of many people's efforts, and just being someone that people can be proud of, myself included, and my entrepreneurs as well. That's very important to me.
You've mentioned the word mentor a few times, Alysia, and I know you've gained from mentoring support over the years. How do you assess if a mentor is good?
Very interesting question. There were times I landed up with mentors where on paper they looked exceptional. In the mentoring relationship, I think it may have been to some extent destructive. At times I didn't have the right mentors, and often it was about my ambition versus their ambition. Had they achieved everything they wanted to? Were there things that were unresolved in their lives that you could see coming out in the mentorship relationship? Absolutely. Now, I'm extremely careful when it comes to mentors, because advice is cheap. It's very, very easy to give people advice and not really think about the consequences. I choose very, very carefully who I mentor, because I'd like to be the mentor that I may have not had when I needed that mentor at a certain point in my life. And so I look at this person and say, how can I help this person as best as possible? Do we have enough in common? Is there a foundation upon which we can build? Is there someone else better out there to mentor that person? What does this person want out of this relationship? Are they motivated to mentor me? Are they going to get bored? This is an important thing that entrepreneurs need to realize. Do they have enough time in their life to dedicate themselves to this relationship? So if I invest my time and energy, will they feel the same way, and will they respond in kind? Will they be there for the long term? Or do they just have some time available in their diary right now and they want to fill it? These are important things, and it does a lot of damage to, let's say, an entrepreneur's self-esteem when they're trying to build this company and they need that support. It's brutal at times. You're doing things that are often very uncomfortable. There's this thing found in depression. People don't talk about it. The higher you strive, often the more difficult it gets. And so being there, being rock solid, there's a book by an FBI profiler. It's all about looking for reliable people and the character traits of what it means to be reliable. And it's a strange exercise to do, but training yourself to look for these character traits, it sets you up for success because you're investing your energy in the right people versus people that may stand to let you down. And life's short. You want to build relationships with people that are going to be there for you through thick or thin. And that's very, very important because that helps set you up for success. And then the other advisors and those types of people as you build your company, just because a person has a fancy CV, I see that time and again here, doesn't mean they're going to be there for you through thick or thin. I pride myself in the fact that I'm available for my entrepreneurs 24 hours a day. A lot of people make a lot of promises that they don't follow through on, but honor yourself, value yourself. That's really important. The best entrepreneurs value themselves. They value their companies, even when these companies are two people. That's something we can all learn.
So I get a real sense of discernment by how they ask discerning questions to really check out who they might be working with. And that by doing that homework and taking the time, it's going to pay dividends in the future, not just money dividends, but in terms of building trust and having long-term relationships that you can rely on.
Absolutely. And ask these people challenging questions. You have questions you want to ask, and you're often too shy to ask them. So you've got this person, and you feel they're somebody that could be a great mentor to you, and they may be very successful or intimidating, whatever the situation may be, and you're trying to make a really good impression on them. And so you answering their questions, but you're not asking them the questions you want to ask them. And what you don't realize is asking those people those questions makes them respect you more and makes them want to put more effort into you. But be brave and ask those questions. This is your life. You only have a certain amount of time, and you want to value that time to get the most out of your own life. And due diligence those people. Go and ask other people about those people. When we first moved to the US, there was a very famous investor, and he had a very good reputation and very high profile. This investor said, well, if you want to know what I'm like, you can go and talk to all the CEOs of all my portfolio companies. And we have, these young entrepreneurs from South Africa, like we were wet behind the ears. And I was like, okay, what have I got to lose? I'm going to message all these founders and I'm going to ask them about this person and let me see. And what came out of it was I changed in the process for the better. I had the courage to actually go and due diligence someone that scared me, that intimidated me, that was way more successful than me. But I honored myself. It was a lesson for life. And being brave and saying, you know what, you'd be lucky to work with me, and not being rude about it, but through your body language, through your engagement with this person, saying, I want to work with you, but what value are you going to add to me? What value are you going to add to my company? I'm going to be a success. I know it. That's why I'm asking you to mentor me. But in order for us to work well together, it starts with me valuing myself. And I need to ask you these questions because otherwise you wouldn't want to spend the time on me. But that's a very, very important thing, asking those challenging questions, even when it scares you to do it.
And that requires courage, of course, for anyone to do that. If we were to fast forward in your life, Alysia, what's the legacy that you want to leave to the world?
To give you a context, I think I need to reflect upon my late father's life, where he lived around the world. He'd had this incredible life in the arts. And I grew up in this family crazy store. Half the store was a pharmacy and half the store was a costume store. But what really stuck out for me was that when my father passed away, he had one of the biggest funerals in the history of Pretoria. And people from all walks of life came. I was this tiny kid, and it was rich people, poor people, politicians, you name it. People showed up at my father's funeral, and it was a life well lived. It was a life of meaning. It was a life of purpose. His shop was founded in 1945. Your listeners can calculate that out. So he was 66 when I was born. And people remember him to this day, and he's been dead for a very long time. And his business still runs to this day in South Africa. And to me, that made a huge impression because I see success here. I look at LinkedIn profiles, people connect with me, and people involved in this company and the great words exited or acquired. And time passes and society doesn't remember those people because that impact was limited. And so when you ask me what kind of impact I want to have, well, I was very, very fortunate. I mentored Nelson Mandela's grandson, and I taught him maths and statistics, and no one even knew how close I got to that family and how much I learned from Mandela. And again, that was a life of a leader. And if I can leave a legacy where the world is better for my life, whatever shape or form that may be, to create more equality, to create a generation of leaders that people like me, people that may have not had everything handed to them, but they have created change on a global scale because we fought for it, because we believed in it, because we became the people that we wanted to be, and we helped take people along those journeys. For me, it's almost critical. Like here in Silicon Valley, people often do the Jeff Bezos challenge where you sit at 80 and you time travel and you say, well, what are the things that I regret and what are the things that I need to do so I don't regret those things? And for me, if the world is not better through the efforts of me and people like me and people who I help, I personally feel I would have failed.
Well, I think you've really given us a sense of what's important for you and the impact that you're already making in the world, Alysia. So it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today. If our listeners want to follow up and find out more about you, how can they do that?
They are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. They're welcome to send me a message on LinkedIn, can ask me to connect, and I look forward to hearing from them.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that they can let you know the impact that your words have had on them after listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time again, Alysia.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you for hosting me, and keep up the great work. You're doing super important work.
So Alysia's story reminded me of the Maya Angelou quote, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." I'm heartened that in the hotbed of capitalism in Silicon Valley, there are people who maintain a sense of helping others and a desire to make a positive difference. What did Alysia's experiences cause you to reflect on in your life? As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or send us a message at accesstoinspiration.org on our website, or just recommend our podcast to one other person so that we can continue to reach more listeners. In the next episode, I will be talking to Andrew Scott, a Michelin-starred chef. He will be talking to me about what it takes to achieve and sustain excellence as a chef. I hope you will join us then.